Among the vast expanses of the cosmos, the Zephyria Alliance stood as a formidable power, their military prowess unmatched across multiple star systems. The Zephyrian fleet was known for its disciplined formations, unwavering adherence to battle doctrines, and the cold efficiency with which they executed their maneuvers. At the heart of their reconnaissance division was Commander Vexar Vexari, a veteran with 40 years of military service etched into his deep blue skin and weathered features. Vexari stood on the command bridge of the cloaked Zephyrian scout vessel, his tall, angular frame perfectly still as he observed the space battle unfolding before him. His large, multifaceted eyes narrowed as he processed the tactical data streaming across the holographic displays. The scout ship hovered at a safe distance, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both human and Krellian sensors. "Maintain position," Vexari ordered, his voice carrying the harmonics, typical of Zephyrian speech. "Record all battle parameters at maximum resolution." The tension between interstellar species had reached a critical point. The Zephyria Alliance had dispatched Vexari on this classified mission to assess the military capabilities of humans, a relatively new player in galactic politics. The humans were engaged in a territorial dispute with the Krellians, another expansionist race that had recently encroached upon human colonies in the Orion Arm. Vexari's mission was simple: observe, analyze, and report on human warfare tactics to determine whether they posed a potential threat to Zephyrian interests. What he didn't expect was that this routine reconnaissance mission would fundamentally change his understanding of warfare and ultimately his life's trajectory. "Commander," his tactical officer called, "the human fleet appears to be initiating a retreat pattern." Vexari leaned forward, mandibles clicking in concentration. The tactical display showed the human fleet reorganizing into a withdrawal formation. By all established military doctrine, this was a standard retreat, a textbook example that Vexari had seen countless times. "Predictable," he muttered. "The Krellians have superior numbers and firepower. The humans are making the logical choice to—" He stopped mid-sentence. Something peculiar was happening on the sensors. "What are those signals?" he demanded, pointing to a strange pattern emerging on the tactical display. The officer manipulated the controls, enhancing the sensor readings. "Sir, it appears the human fleet has doubled." Vexari's exoskeletal ridges rose in surprise. "Impossible. Verify sensor integrity." "Sensors functioning at optimal capacity." "Sir, the human fleet has somehow created ghost signals identical to their ships. The Krellians are responding as if they're real." Vexari watched in astonishment as the retreating human fleet suddenly split, the ghost signals continuing the retreat pattern, while the actual ships executed a perfect flanking maneuver. Simultaneously, another human battle group emerged from behind a nearby moon, creating a pincer movement that caught the Krellian fleet completely off guard. "This tactic," Vexari whispered. "I've never seen anything like it in any military manual." The Krellian commanders, evidently confused by the ghost signals, divided their forces, some pursuing what they believed to be the retreating human fleet, others turning to face the flanking attack. This division proved fatal. The human ships that had initially retreated suddenly reversed course, their engines flaring as they charged back into the fray, catching the pursuing Krellian vessels between two lethal formations. "Record everything," Vexari ordered, his voice betraying his excitement. "This isn't in any of our tactical databases." Over the next several hours, Vexari observed the battle with growing fascination. Every time the Krellians adapted to a human tactic, the humans would shift to something entirely different. When the Krellians attempted to employ a standard Zephyrian counteroffensive pattern, a strategy that had been shared among allied species, the humans responded with a maneuver that seemed to anticipate it perfectly. "They're not fighting according to any established doctrine," Vexari noted aloud. "They're improvising." The battle concluded with a decisive human victory. The Krellian fleet, despite its superior numbers and firepower, retreated in disarray, leaving behind disabled vessels and debris. The humans efficiently organized rescue operations for both their own damaged ships and, surprisingly, for the stranded Krellian survivors as well. As the scout ship disengaged to return to Zephyrian space, Vexari remained on the bridge, reviewing the battle recordings. Something profound had occurred, something that challenged 4 decades of military certainty. Set course for High Command, he instructed, his mind already wrestling with how to explain what he had witnessed. The conventional report templates would be inadequate for this. How could he categorize tactics that defied categorization? The journey back to Zephyrian space gave Vexari time to analyze the battle data meticulously. He studied the human ghost signals technique, their uncanny ability to create battlefield illusions, and their remarkable tactical flexibility. The more he analyzed, the more he realized that the humans weren't simply employing clever strategies. They were approaching warfare with a fundamentally different mindset. Upon arriving at the Zephyrian Central Command Station, Vexari was immediately summoned to report to General Thesara, the supreme military commander of the Zephyrian forces. Thesara was legendary among Zephyrians, her rigid adherence to traditional battle doctrines, having secured countless victories over the centuries. The general's office was sparse and utilitarian, reflecting the Zephyrian values of efficiency and purpose. Thesara stood by the viewing port, her dark blue exoskeleton marked with the golden insignias of her rank. She didn't turn as Vexari entered. "Commander Vexari," she acknowledged, "I've reviewed your preliminary report. It lacks conclusive assessments." Vexari stood at attention. "General, the human combat methodologies defy our traditional classification systems. They employ tactics that—" "I'm not interested in what they do differently," Thesara interrupted, turning to face him. Her multifaceted eyes gleamed with impatience. "I need to know how they can be defeated using Zephyrian methods." Vexari hesitated. "With respect, General, that's precisely what I'm attempting to explain. The humans don't adhere to predictable patterns. They adapt continuously, creating new tactics in real-time response to battlefield conditions." Thesara's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Every species believes their approach to warfare is unique, Commander. Yet all fall before superior force applied according to proven doctrine." "The data suggests otherwise," Vexari persisted. "The Krellians employed tactics similar to our own, and the humans countered them with approaches we've never documented. Then your report should outline these approaches so we can develop countermeasures," Thesara stated firmly. "That's just it," Vexari explained, frustration seeping into his normally controlled tone. "They don't have a fixed set of approaches. They create new ones as needed. It's not about what they do, it's about how they think." Thesara's posture stiffened. "Commander, you were sent to gather intelligence, not to admire the enemy. I expect a complete report by tomorrow, with clear classifications of human tactics and recommended Zephyrian countermeasures." Vexari knew what was being asked of him, to force his observations into the rigid framework of Zephyrian military doctrine, even if it meant distorting the truth. He was being ordered to conclude that humans could be defeated using traditional methods, regardless of what he had actually witnessed. "General, I cannot in good conscience provide such a report," he said quietly. Thesara's eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing a direct order, Commander?" "I'm refusing to falsify intelligence, General. The data doesn't support the conclusion you're seeking." The air in the office seemed to crystallize with tension. Thesara moved closer, her imposing height allowing her to look down at Vexari. "Your duty is to the Zephyrian Alliance, Commander. If you cannot fulfill that duty as ordered, perhaps your 4 decades of service have dulled your clarity of purpose." Vexari stood his ground. "My duty is to provide accurate intelligence that serves the true interests of the Alliance. Presenting a false assessment of human capabilities would endanger our forces, if conflict ever arose. "You overstep your authority," Thesara hissed. "I will have your report tomorrow, as instructed, or I will have your rank. Is that understood?" In that moment, Vexari made a decision that would alter the course of his life. 40 years of dedicated service, of unquestioning loyalty to the chain of command, balanced against what he knew to be true. The scales tipped decisively. "You will have neither, General," he said, reaching up to remove the command insignia from his uniform. "I hereby resign my commission, effective immediately." Thesara's mandibles flared in shock. "This is unprecedented. You cannot simply—" "I can and I am," Vexari interrupted, placing his insignia on Thesara's desk. Military Code Section 47.3 permits immediate resignation of commissioned officers in times of peace. We are not at war with humans, and I choose to exercise this right rather than compromise my integrity. "This is tantamount to treason, Vexari," Thesara warned. "Where will you go? What will you do without the structure of military service?" Vexari's multifaceted eyes reflected a determination that surprised even himself. "I will go to Earth." "Earth? You would defect to humans?" Thesara's voice rose in disbelief. "Not defect," Vexari corrected. "Learn. If we cannot understand how humans think about warfare, we risk catastrophic miscalculation. I will study them directly." "I could have you detained," Thesara threatened. "On what grounds? I've broken no laws, unless you wish to fabricate charges, which would require explanation to the Civil Council. You have no basis for detention." Thesara knew he was right. The separation of military and civil authority was fundamental to Zephyrian governance, a check against exactly this kind of overreach. "Leave then," she said coldly. "But remember, once you cross this threshold, you are no longer Zephyrian military. The protections and privileges you have enjoyed for 40 years will no longer apply." Vexari nodded. "I understand the consequences of my choice. General, good day." He turned and walked out of the office, his back straight, his stride purposeful. By the time he reached the docking bay, he had already composed his formal resignation letter and submitted it to the Personnel Division. He requisitioned a small interstellar vessel, his right as a retiring officer of his rank, and plotted a course for the Sol system. As the ship broke free of the Zephyrian station's gravitational field, Vexari felt a curious mixture of apprehension and liberation. For the first time in 4 decades, he was not bound by orders or doctrine. He was free to pursue what he believed to be true, rather than what he was told was true. The journey to Earth would take several weeks. Even with the advanced propulsion systems of his vessel, Vexari used this time to review everything in the Zephyrian databases about human culture, history, and particularly their approach to warfare. The more he studied, the more he realized how fundamentally different human thinking was from Zephyrian rigidity. Humans had a chaotic history of constant warfare among themselves, evolving their tactics through bitter necessity rather than theoretical doctrine. They learned through failure, a concept almost heretical to Zephyrian military philosophy, which viewed failure as unacceptable and learning as something that happened in academies, not battlefields. Upon approaching the Sol system, Vexari followed diplomatic protocols, broadcasting his identity and peaceful intentions well before entering Earth's defensive perimeter. To his surprise, the response was not suspicious or hostile, but cautiously welcoming. The human authorities, upon learning that a former high-ranking Zephyrian commander wished to study Earth's military approaches, arranged for his arrival at New Haven, one of their off-Earth colonies that served as a cultural exchange hub. New Haven orbited Earth at Lagrange Point L5, a massive space station that served as humanity's greeting card to the galaxy. Its architecture was a striking blend of functionality and aesthetic beauty, with vast, transparent domes revealing lush gardens and water features, a sharp contrast to the utilitarian design of Zephyrian structures. As Vexari's ship docked, he was greeted by a welcoming committee, led by Lieutenant Amy Foster, a young human officer whose friendly demeanor immediately challenged Vexari's expectations of military personnel. "Commander Vexari," she said with a warm smile, extending her hand in the human greeting custom. "Welcome to New Haven. We're honored to have you." Vexari awkwardly attempted the handshake, his three-fingered hand engulfing Foster's. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I must correct you. However, I am no longer a commander. I have resigned my commission." Foster looked surprised but nodded respectfully. "I understand. What should we call you then?" "Vexari will suffice," he replied. "Civilian titles are unfamiliar to me." "Well, Vexari, we've arranged accommodations for you and scheduled introductory meetings with various officials who can help orient you to life here. Admiral Parker has expressed personal interest in meeting you to discuss your observations of the battle with the Krellians." Vexari's multifaceted eyes widened slightly. "You know about that?" Foster smiled. "We detected your scout ship, though we chose not to acknowledge it at the time. The cloaking technology is impressive, but our quantum fluctuation detectors can identify the energy signature of Zephyrian engines." This revelation stunned Vexari. The humans had known they were being observed and had proceeded with their battle anyway, showcasing their capabilities openly. It was either supreme confidence or a calculated message. Over the following days, Vexari was introduced to various human military officials. Admiral Parker, a distinguished officer with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, spent hours discussing the battle with the Krellians. "The ghost signals technique," Parker explained, "was developed by Captain Morrison's tactical team. It's a combination of advanced holographics and signal duplication that creates convincing phantom ships to confuse enemy sensors." "It was most effective," Vexari acknowledged. "But how do your commanders know when to employ such techniques? There must be a decision matrix, a predetermined set of conditions that trigger specific tactical responses." Parker exchanged glances with Captain Morrison, a stocky man with dark skin and an easy laugh. "That's not exactly how we operate, Vexari. Our officers are trained to think, not just follow protocols." "I don't understand," Vexari admitted. "Without established doctrine, how do you maintain tactical coherence? How do commanders know what to do?" "They assess the situation and make decisions based on the specific circumstances," Morrison explained. "We have general principles, of course, but we value adaptability over rigid adherence to predetermined tactics." This concept was so foreign to Zephyrian military thinking that Vexari struggled to comprehend it. In his culture, deviation from established doctrine was seen as a failure of discipline, not a virtue of leadership. After several weeks on New Haven, Vexari was invited to visit Earth itself. The planet's diversity of environments, cultures, and peoples overwhelmed his senses. He was hosted by Kate Sullivan, a cultural liaison officer who guided him through various human communities, each with its distinct customs and ways of life. In New York, he observed the bustling energy of human commerce and creativity. In Nairobi, he witnessed the blending of ancient traditions with futuristic technology. In Tokyo, he marveled at the orderly complexity of human urban planning. Everywhere he went, he was struck by the contradictions of human society: chaotic yet functional, diverse yet unified, competitive yet cooperative. During his stay in Vancouver, Vexari was introduced to Captain Ryan Mitchell, who commanded a training facility for special operations. Mitchell invited Vexari to observe training exercises, where human soldiers were presented with increasingly complex and unpredictable scenarios. "Notice how we don't give them solutions," Mitchell pointed out, as they watched a team navigate a particularly challenging simulation. "We give them problems and expect them to figure out how to solve them." But what if they develop inefficient solutions? Vexari asked. Wouldn't it be more effective to teach them the optimal approach based on previous experience? Mitchell shook his head. There is rarely one optimal approach in real combat situations. Conditions change. Enemies adapt. We're not training them to follow procedures. We're training them to think creatively under pressure. This philosophy extended beyond military training. Vexari was introduced to Professor Amanda West, a leading researcher in cognitive adaptability at the University of California. West's laboratory was studying how humans developed new neural pathways when confronted with novel problems. The human brain is remarkably plastic, West explained, showing Vexari brain scans of people solving unfamiliar puzzles. We form new connections constantly, allowing us to approach problems from different angles. Is this unique to humans? Vexari asked. Not entirely, West replied. Many species have adaptable brains, but humans seem particularly adept at lateral thinking, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts to create novel solutions. This concept resonated with what Vexari had observed in the space battle. The humans hadn't just executed tactics well, they had created new tactics on the fly, combining elements in ways that Zephyrian military thinking would never have considered. The pinnacle of Vexari's Earth experience came when he was invited to attend classes at the Earth Military Academy, the prestigious institution where human officers received their advanced training. Commander Sam Torres, the Academy's Director of Tactical Studies, arranged for Vexari to participate in various courses as an observer and occasional guest lecturer. We're as curious about Zephyrian military thinking as you are about ours, Torres explained. This exchange benefits both our cultures. The Academy was nothing like Vexari had expected. Instead of the rigid, hierarchical structure of Zephyrian military education, the Earth Military Academy emphasized collaborative problem-solving, open debate, and even encouraged respectful questioning of established doctrines. In Professor James Rogers' military history class, Vexari was astonished to hear students critically analyzing historical battles, questioning the decisions of famous generals, and proposing alternative approaches that might have yielded better outcomes. In Zephyrian education, Vexari commented afterward, the focus would be on memorizing the correct doctrine, not questioning historical applications of it. Rogers smiled. If we only taught our students what worked in the past, they'd be unprepared for the future. Warfare evolves. Technology changes. Society transforms. The principles that guided Wellington or Eisenhower may not apply in the age of interstellar conflict. In Captain William Davis's tactical planning course, students were presented with complex, multidimensional scenarios with no clear solutions. Teams competed to develop approaches, then defended their thinking against rigorous questioning from peers and instructors. I notice there is no single correct answer that students must reach, Vexari observed. That's right, Davis confirmed. We're more interested in their reasoning process than their specific conclusion. A well-reasoned approach that fails is more valuable as a learning tool than a successful one that the student can't explain. This was the inverse of Zephyrian military education, where results were everything, and the process was expected to follow established patterns without deviation. Perhaps most illuminating was Major Elena Garcia's course on failure analysis. Here, students studied military disasters not as cautionary tales of what to avoid, but as rich sources of data about what happened, why it happened, and how similar situations might be handled differently in the future. Failure is our greatest teacher, Garcia told her class, seemingly untroubled by Vexari's presence as she criticized a historical human military disaster. When we succeed, we often don't know exactly why. When we fail, the reasons become painfully clear. Vexari found this approach revolutionary. In Zephyrian culture, failure was shameful, something to be hidden rather than studied. The idea of openly dissecting failures as a path to improvement challenged his deepest cultural programming. The final piece of Vexari's Earth education came from Dr. Thomas Parker, who taught a course on psychological warfare and the human dimension of combat. Parker's lessons focused not on weapons or tactics, but on the minds of those who wielded them. Combat is ultimately a human endeavor, Parker explained to his students. We can have the most advanced technology and the most brilliant tactics, but if we don't understand the psychological aspects, fear, courage, loyalty, perception, decision-making under stress, we miss the most crucial element of warfare. This holistic approach to military education helped Vexari understand what he had observed in the battle against the Krellians. The humans hadn't just outfought their opponents. They had outthought them, anticipating psychological reactions and exploiting them. As months passed, Vexari's status evolved from curious visitor to respected contributor. He began offering lectures on Zephyrian tactical approaches, helping human officers understand the mindset they might encounter in potential conflicts. Simultaneously, he absorbed human military philosophy, gradually integrating their flexible thinking into his own rigid Zephyrian framework. One evening, after a particularly engaging seminar, where Vexari had presented Zephyrian fleet formations, and human officers had proposed various counters, Admiral Parker invited him to a private conversation. "You've been with us for nearly a year now, Vexari," Parker noted, as they shared a drink in his office overlooking the academy grounds. "What do you think of human military thinking?" Vexari considered the question carefully. "It is unsystematic by Zephyrian standards, chaotic, even. But I've come to see that this apparent chaos conceals a deeper order, one based not on rigid doctrine, but on adaptive principles." Parker nodded. "And how has this understanding changed you?" "Profoundly," Vexari admitted. "I resigned my commission because I couldn't force what I observed into Zephyrian categories. Now, I understand that the categories themselves were the problem. You humans don't just fight differently. You think differently about fighting itself. And about learning," Parker added. "That's the key distinction. I believe we expect warfare to evolve constantly, so we train our people to evolve with it." Vexari leaned forward. "Admiral, I've been considering my future. My resignation from Zephyrian service was final, but I still possess knowledge and experience that could be valuable." "Are you proposing an official position with Earth Forces?" Parker asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not exactly," Vexari clarified. "I'm proposing a bridge between our cultures. The Zephyrian Alliance and Earth have no formal diplomatic relations, but perhaps we could establish an educational exchange. I could help facilitate understanding between our military philosophies." Parker seemed intrigued. "A liaison position of sorts, not military, not quite diplomatic, but educational." "Precisely," Vexari confirmed. "Zephyrians have much to learn from human adaptability, and humans could benefit from understanding Zephyrian systematic approaches where they do apply." The idea gained traction quickly. Within weeks, Vexari was appointed as the first interspecies military education liaison, a position created specifically for him that allowed him to develop curricula for both human and Zephyrian officers interested in cross-cultural military philosophy. The Zephyrian High Command, initially resistant to the idea, gradually recognized the potential benefits. General Thessera remained opposed, but other military leaders saw value in understanding human approaches, if only to better counter them if necessary. For Vexari, the new role represented a synthesis of his old life and new understanding. He hadn't abandoned his Zephyrian identity or military experience. He had expanded it, incorporating human flexibility into his thinking while maintaining the analytical rigor of his native culture. 2 years after his dramatic resignation, Vexari stood before a mixed class of human and Zephyrian officer candidates at the newly established Interspecies Military Academy on New Haven. The Zephyrian students sat in perfect formation, their posture rigid, while the humans arranged themselves more casually, some even leaning forward eagerly. "Today," Vexari began, "we will examine the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where human and Krellian forces engaged. But we will analyze it from both perspectives: the systematic Zephyrian approach and the adaptive human methodology." As he guided the discussion, Vexari observed with satisfaction how the human students contributed innovative perspectives, while the Zephyrians offered structured analysis. More importantly, he noticed how each group began adopting elements of the other's thinking, humans appreciating the value of systematic assessment, Zephyrians cautiously exploring more flexible approaches. During a practical exercise, a young Zephyrian officer named Tyrell proposed an unorthodox solution to a tactical problem, one that clearly showed human influence. When questioned by his Zephyrian peers, Tyrell defended his thinking with confidence. "The objective is victory, not adherence to doctrine," Tyrell argued. "If a non-standard approach achieves superior results, is that not the logical choice?" Vexari suppressed the equivalent of a Zephyrian smile. This was precisely the transformation he had hoped to nurture. Not an abandonment of Zephyrian strengths, but an expansion of Zephyrian thinking to include adaptability alongside discipline. After class, Lieutenant Foster, now Captain Foster, approached Vexari. "They're getting it," she observed. "Both sides. It's remarkable to watch." "It's just beginning," Vexari replied. "True integration of our approaches will take generations. But the foundation is being laid." "Do you ever regret it?" Foster asked. "Resigning your commission, leaving your homeworld?" Vexari gazed out the viewport at the blue curve of Earth, visible beyond New Haven structures. "I left behind certainty," he said thoughtfully. "The comfort of clear doctrine, of always knowing the correct approach. But in exchange, I gained something more valuable: the understanding that in warfare, as in life, there is rarely one perfect solution, but rather a universe of possibilities waiting to be discovered." Foster smiled. "That sounds remarkably human." "Perhaps," Vexari acknowledged. "Or perhaps it's simply the truth, regardless of species." As they watched human and Zephyrian officer candidates continuing their discussion even after class had ended, Vexari reflected on his journey. He had come to Earth expecting to study human warfare, but had ended up studying human thinking. The ghost signals that had so confused him during that first battle had turned out to be more than just a clever tactic. They were symbolic of humanity's ability to reimagine reality, to see possibilities where Zephyrians saw only fixed patterns. In that moment, standing alongside representatives of two vastly different cultures beginning to learn from each other, Vexari understood that he had not just resigned from military service. He had graduated to a higher form of service, not to a single species or doctrine, but to the pursuit of truth itself. The real revolution wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the mind, and that revolution was just beginning. In the following years, Vexari's initiative expanded beyond military education to broader cultural exchanges. The Interspecies Academy grew to include civilian programs focused on governance, arts, and sciences. The rigid boundaries between Zephyrian and human approaches began to blur, as each civilization recognized valuable elements in the other's perspective. Vexari himself became a revered figure in both cultures. To humans, he represented the possibility of growth beyond rigid thinking. To Zephyrians, he demonstrated that adaptability need not mean abandoning core principles. His dramatic resignation, once seen as an act of betrayal by some Zephyrians, came to be understood as an act of profound loyalty to a deeper truth than mere doctrine. Perhaps most significantly, the improved understanding between humans and Zephyrians led to a formal alliance that combined Zephyrian discipline with human creativity, a formidable partnership that transformed the balance of power in their region of the galaxy. When asked years later about the moment that changed everything, the decision to resign his commission and journey to Earth, Vexari would reply with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I didn't abandon my post. I simply recognized that my true post was not where I stood, but where I needed to be." Sometimes loyalty to truth requires us to move beyond the familiar into unexplored territory. That is the ultimate lesson I learned from humans, that boundaries exist primarily in our minds, and that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from transcending our own limitations. On the anniversary of the Battle of Proxima Centauri each year, Vexari would gather with a mixed group of human and Zephyrian colleagues to commemorate not the victory itself, but the understanding that grew from it. They would raise their glasses, humans with their wine, Zephyrians with their luminescent nectars, and toast to the ghost signals that had changed the course of two civilizations. To seeing beyond what is, Vexari would proclaim, to what could be. And in that simple toast was contained the essence of his journey, from rigid commander to visionary bridge builder, from certainty to possibility, from isolation to connection. It was a journey that had begun with confusion over an unexpected tactic in space battle, but had expanded to encompass nothing less than a new way of thinking about the universe and every species' place within it.